Hello, this is Audrey welcoming you to the 1287th edition of the Enfield Talking newspaper, Dateline the 12th of October, the year 2000. And the readers are Carol and Jeff, Jean and Alan, with John on the controls. The main stories this week, we start off with something called a stench warfare. The Greens shut down the waste plant. After 40 years of producing a tape, Enfield Talking newspaper were unable to record, and also father lay dying on a railway line. A cedar tree for Pims Park is on the way. And I'm going to start with the first headline, which is very important to us, that after 40 years, ETN were unable to produce a news tape. I expect you're wondering what has happened to the news tape. Indeed, many of you have rung to inquire why your copy has not arrived. The fact is that last week, at just 3 days' notice, Enfield Talking newspaper were asked to remove all their equipment from the building in Southbury Road. It used to belong to NatWest, and they gave us support and accommodation for 15 years. About 18 months ago, the firm changed hands and became First National, and I believe it belongs to Abbey National. And they have embarked on a huge refurbishment exercise, and it was no longer safe for us to use the premises. Tessa did a wonderful job organising a van and helpers to move everything. Of course, we had nowhere to put anything except Tessa's garage. With the very wet weather we have had this week, this was not an ideal situation for all the electrical equipment that we have. The charity had no time to produce a tape and let everyone know what had happened. So it's all a bit makeshift this week, and we are recording tonight from my front room until we sort ourselves out. Obviously, we are looking for a place to work on Thursday and Friday evenings, and if you hear of anyone who might be able to help us, please let us know. Above all, please send your wallets back this week as usual, as we are not able to send any duplicates at all. As Jeff says in our group, we ought not to be called Enfield Talking newspaper, but Enfield Walking newspaper at the moment. Well, I think that just about sums up how we all feel. Anyway, there'll be more details and an update next week from Tessa, so watch this space. And now over to Carol for the next item of news.
MP Andy Love called for a public inquiry into waste incineration this week after daring Greenpeace protesters shut down the Edmonton incinerator. In dramatic scenes on Monday morning, 5 eco-warriors sneaked past security to scale the plant's 100-metre chimney, while 50 others chained themselves to cranes or formed a human barricade. By the afternoon, the incinerator had stopped burning rubbish and the flues had been sealed, preventing the furnaces from starting up again in the short term and causing chaos to rubbish collection. Mr. Love demanded wide public consultation over a planned expansion of the incinerator. He said, "The full environmental consequences of any expansion have never been properly explored. That is why I have asked for a public inquiry. The incinerator may be located in Edmonton, but it serves a much wider area. That is why it is sensible for any decisions to be made within the overall context of a London-wide waste strategy." Greenpeace protesters swooped on the plant as part of a campaign against waste incineration, which they claim emits dangerous gases. And while most of the team left the plant on Monday, 9 volunteers stayed on to continue the protest. Speaking to the Enfield Independent by mobile phone from the top of the chimney, Rob Guterbock of Greenpeace said, "We have enough food to stay up here well over a week. We want to stop the Edmonton cancer factory spewing out toxic emissions all over North London. It's regretful that we are stopping waste collection, but we are stopping people's rubbish coming back and haunting them in the form of toxic emissions. We are doing this for all the people who have incinerators in their area." Mr. Love called for public consultation in July last year and April this year, asking that the Greater London Authority make the final decision. And a Greenpeace spokesman said the organisation was forced to act after it learned of plans to expand the Edmonton plant. Steve Tyndale said, "This is the largest incinerator in Britain. They want to make it 50% larger again. There are extremely dangerous amounts of gas coming out of here, and it's time it was shut down." Steve Brown, who's the operations director of London Waste Limited, which owns the site, said, "The operations of London Waste are regulated by the Environment Agency and comply with all relevant government legislation. The Scaremongering statements made by Greenpeace are not borne out by independent and UK government legislation. We call on Greenpeace to call off this action. We are determined to resume normal operations. An Enfield Council spokesman revealed that local waste would be transferred to the Hendon waste disposal site. He said, "There may be an increase in the time it takes for collections from households, but we expect to be able to cater for that through staff overtime and, if necessary, by bringing in more staff to work on Saturday."
A young father lay bleeding to death on a railway track in Bush Hill Park for nearly 2 hours before he was found. An inquest heard on Friday. By the time Railtrack closed the line, 5 trains had travelled along the track where 24-year-old Paul Irvin had been hit. When the driver reported that he may have hit a trespasser, the only person available to check that track was in Bishop Stortford in Hertfordshire, Hornsey Coroner's Court heard. The dreadful accident happened on Saturday, February the 5th this year, shortly after 6:30 p.m. Paul Irvin, a postman with a 2-year-old son, was still alive when he was found by Railtrack signalling manager Richard Sadler. The Belfast-born man from Hadrian's Ride in Bush Hill Park was taken to Chase Farm Hospital with severe head injuries, but was declared dead by doctors at 10:15 p.m. The jury returned an open verdict by a majority after Assistant Deputy Coroner Dr. Andrew Reid ruled out suicide and lack of care. The last few days before Paul Irvin died were traumatic, but both the coroner and his friends and family believe there is no strong evidence that he had wanted to commit suicide. The night before the accident, he had visited his girlfriend, Amy Wilson, and their son Joe, with some friends. The pair had argued, and Paul later told his father that he had broken some furniture and the police had been called and arrested him. Paul had also just learned that his landlord wanted to throw him out of his flat. He met his father and some friends at the Lincoln Arms pub in Lincoln Road for a drink, but left soon after arriving at 5:45 p.m. How and why he got onto the nearby railway track remains a mystery. The next time he was seen was by train driver Paul Barnes, who was driving the 1836 service from Enfield to Liverpool Street. Approaching the footbridge near Bush Hill Park Station, Mr. Barnes saw Paul Irvin on one of the rails less than 75 yards ahead of him, lit by the lights of the train for a split second. He had no time to brake. He said, "I thought I was going to hit the person. I didn't want to see it, so I turned to one side." Some years before, a person had walked in front of a train being driven by Mr. Barnes. "There was no similarity to that here, and I thought I hadn't struck anybody," he said. He reported seeing a trespasser to the signal operator, who informed signal manager Richard Sadler at about 7 p.m. The driver of the following train was ordered to go at a snail's pace through the area, but he couldn't see anything. Trains were put back on normal service as a result. Mr. Sadler had been conducting a signalling exam in Bishop Stortford at the time he was told of the incident. He told the court, "At that stage there was no evidence there was somebody or anything on the line." He searched the area at about 8:25 p.m. Just as he was about to leave, he saw Paul's body between a box magnet and the right-hand rail.
Paul Irvin, the train accident victim, had heroically saved a woman's life in a fire 5 years earlier. He was also a devoted father and popular workmate among colleagues at the post office sorting office in Palmer's Green. Paul's family moved from Belfast to London when he was 1 year old. A former pupil at St Ignatius School in Turkey Street, he played football for Percival Youth and was a devout Arsenal fan. He had a 2-year-old son, Joe. It was Paul's heroics 5 years ago that his mother, Phyllis Thompson, is most proud of. She said he and his friend Jake were coming down Southbury Road when they saw a house on fire. Jake was driving and Paul put his foot to the door and took a woman out to safety. There was another fellow involved and Paul never got the credit. He left before the emergency people arrived. Railtrack said this week that it does not feel there is any need to review safety procedures following Paul's death.
In court last week, Assistant Deputy Coroner Dr Andrew Reid refused to make a report recommending any changes to the system, despite pressure from Paul's father. The area of track that Paul died on was frequently trespassed, the court heard. Rail managers had planned to put in extra fencing and security measures before the accident. There is now an 8-foot tall steel palisade fence around the bottom of the footbridge near the Lincoln Road level crossing, and engineers have installed a wire cage on top of the bridge itself. A spokesman for Railtrack said, "If there was no evidence that anyone was on the line, what do we do?"
Pimm's Park will once again have a beautiful mature cedar tree as its focal point, thanks to the Enfield Independent, which launched a campaign last summer after years of deadlock for compensation over the loss of an historic 300-year-old Lebanese cedar tree in Edmonton. That original tree was hacked down by workmen operating on behalf of the Highways Agency, now known as Transport for London, in 1995 as part of the North Circular Widening Project. But this week, Transport for London has agreed to donate a mature cedar costing approximately £10,000, while the finer details of the compensation package are ironed out. Hundreds of readers backed our fight, says the Independent, which took us to the House of Commons, where we handed over our petition to the Minister for London, Keith Hill MP. Edmonton MP Andy Love asked the questions in the Commons about the cedar row, and Enfield Councillor Andrew Stafford even penned a Christmas song to raise awareness of the battle. Mr. Love, speaking from Sri Lanka, where he is an election observer, saluted the Independent on the successful campaign. Pimm's Park just hasn't been the same since the loss of that beautiful cedar tree, he said. The Independent support was crucial. Well done to the paper and all your readers who backed the campaign. Councillor Stafford said, "The reinstatement of the cedar tree is a victory for the people of Edmonton. I would like to thank everybody who has taken part in our long campaign to force the Highways Agency to own up to its responsibility. A special ceremony and a day of celebration are expected to be organised later this year to plant the new tree."
Mary's Supreme Fish Bar in South Street, Enfield, has been named the champion of We're in Business competition. The popular fish and chip shop was a runaway winner, scooping almost 40% of the votes in our regional awards. As our winner, Mary's Supreme Fish Bar received several family tickets to the Dome, a bottle of champagne supplied by the Corporation of London, and a certificate to mark its achievement. It has also had the option of entering our national final in the Starship at the Dome on November the 24th. We're in Business is part of the Millennium Experience National Programme of Events and Activities and is supported by the City of London. Mary's Supreme Fish Bar opened in 1918 and is believed to be the oldest surviving fish shop in Enfield. It was taken over by Mary Charalambos in 1973 and was given its current name. Mary still works there, but the shop is now owned by her son Harry. He said, "We are like co-owners now. We have long hours, but we enjoy it thoroughly. We know all the local characters, and they know us. Children that used to come in with their parents now come in with their own children. We see people grow up here." Other businesses shortlisted in our finals were Economy Print in Loughton, Anglia Electrics in Sawbridgeworth, Appliance Care in Harlow, the Busy Bee in Enfield, the Wonder Pub in Enfield, the Bargain Bookshop in Chinkford, H. Cook Children and Schoolwear in Walthamstow, and Masquerade in Chingford. Hundreds of Dome tickets are also being awarded to a selection of people who voted in our awards.
The way in which waiting times at hospitals are calculated is misleading the public, Enfield's Community Health Council has claimed. The Health Watchdog has carried out a survey of the time patients waited for treatment in the Accident and Emergency Department at Chase Farm Hospital in the Ridgeway, Enfield, between July and December last year. The CHC concluded that NHS performance tables are misleading because waiting times are calculated from the moment a hospital decides to admit a patient to when they are allocated a bed and receive treatment. The CHC says it would be more accurate to count waiting times from when the patients first arrive at hospital. The organisation is concerned about Chase Farm in particular, where so far this year more than 25 patients each month have waited more than 12 hours for treatment, a figure which exceeds the hospital's target. One patient at the hospital even waited more than 24 hours on a trolley in May. The chairwoman of Enfield CHC said, "The figures vary greatly from those produced by the NHS, and we feel ours may well tally more with people's experiences of going to hospital." The average waiting times endured at Chase Farm by patients during the period of the study ranged from 2.5 hours in September 1999 to a high of 5.5 hours in December. At the North Mid, patients waited an average of 2.5 hours in May, but 3 hours and 40 minutes in March, according to the survey.
Security is to be stepped up at a tower block due to fears that oil had been maliciously placed in its supply of hot water. Water firm Hertel has admitted that traces of oil found in the water tank of Curtis House, New Southgate, last month had probably been placed intentionally, and police officers have visited the tower block with council housing officers, advising them to strengthen locks on the doors leading to the tank room to stop intruders entering. A council spokesman said, "The investigation team, which was independently employed by the council, has stated that the most likely source for the oil was by malicious placing. However, there is no conclusive proof that this is the case, and therefore the police have not investigated further. They have been made aware of the situation and have visited the site to advise on security and how it can be improved to stop this occurring again." The council ordered testing in September when residents complained they could smell diesel in the water days after a spillage of a diesel delivery in the basement. The first tests found there was no trace of oil in the cold water, but a tiny trace of hydrocarbons in the hot water supply, which was well below government safety levels. Water systems were drained on the estate and tanks replaced by the council due to the incident. Council officers have been monitoring supplies since the incident and claim the water is now completely safe to drink and to use for washing purposes, although they have pledged to continue testing.
An arrest has been made following the collapse of Ozone Travel, which led to hundreds of customers missing out on their summer holidays. The owners of the travel agency, which was based in Station Road, New Southgate, allegedly disappeared with an estimated £250,000 worth of customers' money in June last year. Police confirmed that they arrested a man in connection with the case in July, and he is on bail pending further inquiries. The man will be further quizzed by cops in November, and Enfield Council's Trading Standards Department has compiled a dossier on consumer fraud in the air travel trade, which will be submitted to Deputy Prime Minister John Prescott. The Council's report recommends changes in the law in a bid to reduce consumer fraud in the air travel trade. Councillor Betty Costello, Cabinet Minister responsible for trading standards, said clearly existing legislation does not give the same level of protection for consumers who book flights as those booking package holidays. We will be submitting a report to the Deputy Prime Minister highlighting these cases and making proposals to tighten up legislation. Ozone Travel was inundated with bookings after advertising cheap flights to destinations including Barbados, Los Angeles and Tenerife in the national press. Hundreds of bookings were taken by the company, which only accepted cash or cheque payments. Tickets allegedly failed to arrive.
A charity group has made the life of a mother of a boy with physical and mental handicaps easier. The Enfield Soroptimists presented a cheque for £1,800 to help Denise Greystone install specialised equipment for her son in her house. Denise, a nurse who works with mentally handicapped children, needs the money to help her look after her 5-year-old, Samuel. The group raised the money through various events during the year. A concert was held in the spring, where the Children's Voices of Enfield choir sang. The group also ran a charity auction, supper evenings and quizzes. June Keat, president of the Soroptimists, said, "Denise does a lot of work for mentally handicapped children, so when she needed to install washing facilities for Samuel downstairs, we decided to raise the cash." Denise was presented with the money at the end of September.
At a heated meeting last Thursday, residents of Dover House said it was unacceptable that Enfield Council is proposing to charge them for repairs to their balconies, as revealed in the Advertiser last week. It will cost £1.2 million to make the necessary repairs to Dover House, some of which will be borne by the council. It has planned to charge leaseholders a total of £650,000, with individual bills ranging from £7,000 to £23,000. At the meeting, Council Officer Andrew Key said that he was willing to review what was charged if further information came to light. Leaseholders are liable for any structural defects that come to light 10 years after they buy their flat, a time limit which has expired for many residents. The council says that it was not aware of problems with the balconies before the expiry of this time limit, but leaseholders argued at the meeting that the council should have been, and in fact was, aware of the problems long before the survey was carried out. Leaseholder Haroala Kukali, a trained architect, made a presentation to council officers saying that measures to combat defects in the balconies were put in place in the 1970s. And residents also claimed that there had been no proper maintenance procedures in place for years. Officers said at the meeting that regular maintenance would not have prevented the problems with the balconies.
During World War II, more than 15,000 incendiary bombs fell onto the borough of Enfield. The Germans targeted the Lee Valley because of its industry and rail links, and, as a consequence, air raid shelters were dug throughout the district. 4 of these were built in the grounds of the former St David's Hospital in Edmonton, which has since been converted into Millfield House Arts Centre. On Sunday, one of these was open to the public, and a fascinating tour called the Air Raid Shelter Experience was presented by the Enfield Archaeological Society. The Society organises lectures on all aspects of archaeology and occasional coach trips, as well as excavations where archaeological sites are threatened. 6 years ago, on the 50th anniversary of the D-Day landings, the Society arranged for the air raid shelter to be cleaned up and opened to the public gaze. One of its members, Geoffrey Gillam, was instrumental in pushing for the opening, as he believes the shelter is an important relic of a major global conflict. This place is a part of our history, and like a medieval castle, is a physical reminder of a major conflict, he said. I have always had an interest in the war, and can remember being a 12-year-old when a German bomber crashed in Edmonton. My friend and I were in a shelter at the time, and my mother held us back to stop us running out and having a look at it. The shelter was for the use of hospital staff and patients, and could hold up to 50 people at a time. A chemical toilet and an emergency exit were situated at one end of the narrow concrete room that was so strong it could have withstood anything except a direct hit from one of the bombs. People sometimes spent most of the day and night in this confined space, which must have got uncomfortable. They were quite damp, and you have to remember it was in the days before deodorants, so it must have got very smelly down there. As part of the experience, Geoffrey dresses as an air raid warden and conducts groups into the shelter where he plays them a tape. The recording includes speeches by Chamberlain, sirens, the sound of falling bombs, and a commentary about the effects of the bombing on Enfield. Several hundred people lost their lives from the bombing that was generally quite inaccurate. However, there was the odd lighter moment, like when a bomb exploded in Church Street, causing loads of bodies to litter the streets. Fortunately, on closer inspection, people realised they were just the dummies from the tailor shop that had been thrown through the windows from the blast. Membership of the Society is open to all, and if you'd like more information, please contact Geoffrey Gillam on 0208 367 0263.
A woman who had a routine breast cancer screening test cancelled by local health chiefs has developed the disease. Hilary Harris, 54, was due to have a routine mammogram at the North Middlesex Hospital in March, but the entire breast cancer screening programme was halted from that month. Mrs. Harris, who lives in Enfield Town, eventually went to the private Nuffield Hospital to have the cancer screening tests. She said, "I was told by my doctor in January that I was due to have a mammogram in March, but March came and went, and in June I mentioned to my doctor I had not been called. When the doctor told me the facility was not available in the whole of Enfield and Haringey Health Authority, I was appalled." When Mrs. Harris learned her sister-in-law, who lives in Buckinghamshire, had been diagnosed with breast cancer in August after a routine test, she went to the private Nuffield Hospital. "I was horrified to find out that the North Middlesex's programme had been cancelled. Not everybody is in my position, as they do not have private health insurance. I did not have any symptoms, but have now had several investigations and have been diagnosed with the early stages of breast cancer. Hopefully, mine has been caught early enough." A spokesman for the North Middlesex Hospital Trust said, "North Middlesex Hospital NHS Trust takes patients' concerns about its services most seriously, and following a call from the Enfield Independent, is investigating Mrs. Harris's complaint about delays to her screening appointment. While there have been some delays to the 3-year screening programme due to staffing problems, all our staff are working towards regaining the position of timely 3 yearly appointments for the mammogram programme. The hospital suspended breast cancer screening after 2 radiologists resigned in March. The breast cancer screening programme was restarted on September the 1st, but health chiefs have acknowledged that they now face a 6-month backlog."
The Inn on the Green pub in Palmer's Green is about to become famous after being chosen to feature in a Heineken advertisement. 2 adverts were filmed at the pub which feature real rugby players and take a witty look at rugby and the influence the game has on fans' lives. Hugh Fallon, landlord of the pub, said it was great to watch an advert introduction and see how the whole thing gets put together. With all the appearances that the adverts are going to be making on TV, our pub will be quite famous. The first advert was screened yesterday.
We have reached the end of side 1 for this tape. Please stop your machine now, take out the cassette, turn it over and start side 2.